Welcome to Strategic Planning versus Firefighting with Sally Ng from the Wallace McCain Institute and the Triple Effect. My name is Amanda Tarr, and I lead Venture Services at Invest Nova Scotia. Venture Services is all of our non-dilutive funding programs, our expert advice, and other supports for startups that are planning to raise investment and for the startups that we invest in. I work with amazing founders who are building technology companies that are going to change the world. They're addressing climate change, improving health outcomes, saving our oceans, enhancing our food supply. And I love that I get to be a part of their journey. If you think that we can help support you with your vision, I've put my email, or I'll put my email in the chat. So feel free to reach out. Okay, next, the workshop. We are thrilled to have Sally Ng from the Wallace McCain Institute and the Triple Effect. Sally has worked with multiple corporate innovation teams in Fortune 1000 companies to grow beyond their core business model through strategy and execution. Over the past decade, she's been building entrepreneurial communities in Atlantic Canada, and we are so pleased to have her here. Welcome, Sally.
Thanks so much, Amanda. So welcome, everyone. I'm just going to get my screen going here, and so then you can see everything that's going on there. We'll get things going. And I know some folks are probably still just kind of getting settled back into the sessions. I know there's definitely some really good speakers that were just there. So we will get started here. Give me one moment. Just my monitors decided to move around here. Okay, so to get things started, well, I know it's been a long day, so hopefully everyone's kind of stretching it out and not too tired from earlier. The last session was really good with having lots of comments and questions in the chat. So feel free, ask away. Doesn't usually throw me off. And so feel free, don't be shy, ask any questions that you have in the chat. You should also be able to do a thumbs up or I think claps and things like that. And so potentially too, we might unmute a couple people if there's some questions there. And just forewarning, I will ask a couple questions with the group in the chat. And so hopefully you have your chat window handy as well. But we'll get going. Okay, so, oops. Before I officially start, this is a really pretty photo that I took in Northern Canada, just outside of Cambridge Bay. And this was during the Canada's 150th birthday, where I got a chance to take part in the Canada C3 expedition. And so it was an amazing expedition. Definitely Google it if you've never heard of it. But through that, I had the opportunity to really get to know a lot of Inuit communities up north. And so I do want to make sure that we acknowledge the land that I live on and that many of us are on is unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq. And so I'm grateful that my parents chose Canada 35 years ago to immigrate our entire family. And over the last couple of years, I've had the chance to work with a lot of different Indigenous entrepreneurs through the work that I do. And so it's definitely been a really big learning curve with all of it. And to jump right in, so couple different things before we get started, just so that you have a bit more context around my background. So Amanda mentioned earlier, my day job is that I am the CEO of the Wallace McCain Institute, which is an entrepreneurial institute focused on growing entrepreneurial leaders in Atlantic Canada. And so we have over 550 alumni across the region in all 4 provinces. That's my day job. And then I also have my consulting company, which is the Triple Effect. And so lots there going on. We were kind of chatting earlier where people talk about strategic planning and it really intimidates people oftentimes because it's what is this big word that we're talking about? I'm not really quite sure. How do I get started? It's this big daunting thing, very similar to when people talk about writing a business plan. It's what do I actually have to do? And all those pieces that go along with it. So I'll try to break it down and make it as practical as possible. You'll see my slides that I'm going to share don't have a whole lot of words on them. Once we really get digging into the content, you'll have a link with you that will have the slides as well, and almost basically the worksheets overall. The other piece I'll mention too, because I'll use Wallace McCain Institute as a bit of an example here and there as we're working through things. And so I mentioned we've had close to 550 alumni across the region. They employ over 10,000 employees that are based in Atlantic Canada. And collectively, they have more than $1.3 billion in revenue. And so the programs that we do are for growth stage entrepreneurs, CEOs, business owners, but we also have a program for senior executives. So think senior management, C-suite, VPs of organizations, and also a third program, which is focused on family businesses. And so these are some of the stats that you can take a look at later on too in our impact report. And so lots going on there. Not sure if I'm guessing most folks are from Nova Scotia. And so we definitely have lots of alumni locally as well. So for example, Good Robots, one of our alumni. We've got Dallas Mercer, we've got Janelle Sobey, lots of folks. So I'll leave this slide here for a moment for folks. This is the slides or the templates that you can basically take a quick, if you're on an iPad or if you're on your phone and you want to take a look at that, you can type in that. I'm just grabbing the chat here and I'm just going to paste this into the chat as well. And you can grab that link. So within this link, you can follow along. It's not the exact order because this is the worksheet file. And so you can bookmark it, you can make a copy, all that type of thing to help you work along. So hopefully it's a little bit less intimidating as we start digging into the content. You can also use the worksheets to type in notes of anything I'm saying as well, because I try to keep my slides fairly brief. So we'll jump in. So when it comes to elements of strategic planning, there's these 5 big buckets that I would organize the information into. One being developing that vision and mission. So straightforward, everyone's heard that lots of times. Number 2 is aligning on the objectives and themes and the process. Number 3, research, gather, synthesize, and build. Number 4, communicating, implementing the strategy. And last but not least, evaluating and corrective action. When you look at these words, they're not rocket science words. They're pretty straightforward. And you're like, okay, well, yeah, that's great, Sally. Like those are the parts. So what? Like what intimidates people so much from that? And why do people end up in this crazy firefighting mode with it? I always say it's like when you're working through things, the destination is one thing, but the planning process is actually just as important as the destination because you discover, you research, you learn a lot through that process as well. And so that's a big part of what I'm going to walk you through today with the templates that I have. The other question that people have is, well, so if those words are pretty basic, like why do so many organizations still fail? Hopefully you're not the deer in headlights like this little tiny dog. I do love little dogs and I have a cute little one beside me. Is you don't want to be caught off guard. So how do you navigate all those little moving pieces when it comes to dealing with creating a strategic plan? 2 of the problems, one of them is not facing the problem. And so let's say you're an organization that's brand new, maybe your organization that's been around for 5 or 10 or 20 years. What is the actual real problem? Is it external? Is it internal? Is it that the entire industry is going through rapid, crazy change? Is it that your team is just not ready to grow? Or maybe your team doesn't have the capabilities or skill set to actually execute on what the business needs. Sometimes people write strategic plans and it's just too fluffy. It's too high level. People can't pull the actions out of it. They can't see the path of how you're actually going to make that happen. Or organizations fall into the comfort trap. So they're like, oh, it's been working with us for 10 years. Don't change something that isn't broken, right? So I said to somebody the other day, it's like, if you are a company and a CEO and you haven't played with ChatGPT or any of the AI tools around content or anything like that, and I'm like, you're missing a huge opportunity area, even just to learn and discover in that, because so many different industries are going to get rapidly disrupted because of it. So that's a common thing that people have of why strategic planning fails. The other one is the inability to focus and choose. Goals are not strategies, right? It's that people try to do too many different things all at once. I love the word 3. That's also why my company is called the triple effect. So a lot of times when it comes to the big overarching pillars, or you can call them pillars, objectives, people can't really remember more than 3. So you want to keep it clean and easy, which we'll talk a little bit more about when we get into one of the last points there. So feel free, you've all got emojis. I think from the last group, I can see if you give me a thumbs up or so. If someone wants to test it, feel free to Give me a thumbs up just so I know. Perfect. Okay. Okay. Oh, I see them flying across. Okay. But I don't see who gave me the thumbs up, but thank you for that. Not the last one, but these are the three pieces I think a lot of strategic plans go wrong is it's the emotions. People underestimate the relationships, the feelings, the mental state of all those involved. Imagine if you are working in an organization and you've been there for 20 years and suddenly the entire strategy and focus of the organization has to change. How would that make you feel? Is it nervous? Is it excitement? It really depends. There's a whole mixture of emotions that everyone will go through depending on their experience with the organization. And so you might have some squeaky wheels that are really loud, but they're sort of the outliers when it comes to some of that feedback. And so really keep that top of mind when you're working through those pieces. You don't want to be caught off guard by that. But a lot of times people are like, oh, that's just so-and-so. Well, so-and-so is a person and they can have influence on you too. Maybe you have a board member that's been there for a really long time and they're the reason why a lot of change hasn't been able to happen. So that's a big part. One of my favorite quotes that I always say to people is that change happens at the speed of trust in relationships. And so how do you build that trust when you are rolling out a new strategy or adjusting an existing one? And what are the relationships that you currently have in place? What are some of those relationships that you have to build in order to be able to create that change? Because if you aren't mindful of that, you're going to be hitting a big brick wall later on. And then you're going to be firefighting constantly. So before we jump into the templates, these are 5 reflective questions, and you'll see them pop up again in the next couple of slides. So the first one being, what are your guiding principles? What I mean by guiding principles is think about how do you want to show up? So are you being transparent? Are you being collaborative? They do definitely tie into the values of your organization. But in this process explicitly, what are those guiding principles, right? Are you a public organization? Do you serve the community? Who are all those stakeholders? Which leads to our second one, which is who makes the final decision on the strategic plan? So is it a board that has to stamp approval? Is it a big funder? Is it a big investor? Is it your customers? Who are all those individuals that are involved in that? And then number 3, who are we accountable to? Who do we serve? I always think about it, if you are, let's say, a not-for-profit in the community, well, you're accountable to your funders and so on, but you're accountable to the community that you serve and the demographic that's there. And so who are they? What do they look like? All of that. Number 4 is what research or assessments have been done and or do you have access to? And so you want to make sure that you're not just starting things from scratch that maybe they did 3-4 years ago. So it doesn't mean you have to pay attention to every single little detail, but you should have enough context around, okay, that part didn't work. Let's revisit. That's not really good. Like, don't love that part. We'll have to redo this part. The last one is, what are your current resources and competencies and capabilities? So you as a leader, but also the individuals on your team. Are there restrictions on tech? Are there regulatory things that might actually affect your strategy that you have to be mindful of? And so these questions are not meant to be crazy long paragraphs. They're typically a couple bullet points to initially get you going so that you're not stepping on any, I'll say, landmines as you move through the process. This here is an example, and you'll see this at the very end again. And this is from IntraFocus. So I really like this balanced scorecard because I'm a horrible writer. It takes me forever to write paragraphs of information. Even if I do, I always try to have, I'll say, the 1-pager type version of a document so that I can easily reference it. I can keep it top of mind. I want to make sure that everyone's singing the same song. This is one that I found was pretty straightforward and really easy to remember. So you can think of theirs, like same with theirs, they have the 3 different buckets of what are their strategic priorities. It's content partnerships, community service, brand awareness. What are their strategic results? Okay, these are the pieces. They've got their strategic objectives then broken down into different areas, KPIs, targets, targets and projects overall. And then they've got their core values below. And so I really like this scorecard because I find it's a really quick, nice 1-pager, almost similar to if you think of lean canvases or business model canvases. that happen. Any questions so far on some of those issues before we dig into the next couple slides? Okay, we'll keep going. So you saw the slide earlier. So now these 5 different categories will start to make hopefully a little bit more sense as we move along with it. And I'll break out each of them with a little template, which is part of that slide that I posted within the chat earlier. And so for any of you that came a little bit later, I'll repost it in case you don't see that link. But that's going to open up the next couple slides. Type into it, do whatever you like. First one. I think most CEOs, business leaders, you've heard vision and mission 10,000 times. What I find organizations lose sight on is their purpose. And so it doesn't matter if you are a startup or not-for-profit or if you're government, at the end of the day, what is that purpose? What is that why? Because hopefully that stays consistent forever. And so if you are a clean tech startup, okay, is it preserving water? Is it clean energy? Is it circular packaging? What does that actually look like? And so I always say the purpose is the why. The vision is the where. So one day, it's that big aspirational statement of this is one day where we want to go. The next one, oops, I spelled mission, missed an S there, mission. Mission is the what. What are we doing today that will actually make a difference that we really want to accomplish? The next one is values and principles that I touched on earlier. So what are those values? How do you want to show up? Is it collaborative? Is it transparent? Is it genuine? Is it trustworthy? Like, what are those that you want to make sure that you don't lose sight on? Because this is going to be your anchoring piece as you go through the process of building out that strategic plan. And so think of these slides here as your initial worksheet. So you don't have to write crazy paragraphs. It's just to kind of start to give you ideas on it. The last bucket here is with assumptions. And so every organization has assumptions. If you're a startup, you're working through, okay, will my customers like this? Will they pay it? What are those other pieces when you're going into an organization? So for me, I'm the brand new CEO of Wallace McCain Institute. And so I'm 5.5 months into the role. The organization has been around for 15 years, but it's the first time in 15 years that there's been a leadership change. I've known about WMI for years, like probably well over a decade. I definitely have my assumptions going into it, but I'm also looking at the ecosystem of what other people think of what WMI is. Are those assumptions true or not? Because that will also influence some of that strategy of what I might need to do with that. Any questions? Quiet group. Don't be shy. I took this screenshot from one of the other speakers earlier in the day, which was Nancy Foran. She was doing a session on ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance. And so I just took a screenshot, threw it in here because I really liked her questions that you should also think through is what are the topics and issues that are most relevant to your company, right? So coming back to what that vision mission piece is, what are the greatest risks, assets, finance, operation? What offers the greatest opportunity in terms of innovation, products, and partnership? And so those will help shape the other pieces as well. The next section, number 2, is set and align on objectives, themes, and process. So I often say it's purpose, process, people. I think it's like Simplicity Designs that says that all the time, but it is that purpose, right? So you've done that at the very beginning. People can't remember things. So don't try to overwhelm them with 10,000 objectives. If let's say you initially have 8 or 10 or 20 objectives, then okay, write them all out. Start to clump them together, see if there's similar themes that are emerging. And when you have a group of people, maybe it's your board, maybe it's your employees, maybe it's 2 different groups, do a dot democracy exercise with them, which means that you give them 3 little dots, or maybe it's 3 sticky notes, and you write them on a board. You can use a tool, whatever you want. Basically just get them to vote. Give them 3 votes for the 10 options that you have to see what those trends are and get some feedback from that. The other piece during this is be mindful of your timelines. Is there an actual AGM that you need to be mindful of? And so that you have to have this strategic plan done by. What are they expecting? Are they expecting a 20-page document? All that type of thing. Because this will also tell you on, are you needing to do a public engagement session at some point that requires you to actually survey 200 people? What does that actually look like? And so that's the part that you want to be really, really careful of, because you don't want to underestimate that, because it does take time to pull those pieces together when it comes to that engagement. The stakeholders we've mentioned already earlier, who needs to be involved? Board members, like investors, who are they? How will they be engaged? Do you have alumni? Do you have customers? And then rolling into the process. So once you have those, then you can think through those guiding principles that you thought through earlier. How collaborative do you want it to be? So are there questions that you want to answer through this process? What can we do to kind of to set the stage to pull this information together? Because in the next one, you are starting to pull it together. You've got the previous information and you can put them in point form of, okay, we got this survey, this, and this, but we've got to synthesize it a little bit more and pull it together. Once you know that, then you can start to be like, okay, well, that last market research data was done 5 or 6 years ago. We probably need to do a new one. When it comes to you can do surveys of alumni, public engagement, all of that. For example, I'll use WMI as a case again, is that even though we've been around for 15 years, because we service CEOs and business owners and senior executives and family-owned businesses, I'm like, what is the stat on how many family-owned businesses exist in Atlantic Canada? How can I find that stat really easily? And also with the CEOs and business owners that we work with, we don't work with startups. They're across all industries, from car dealerships to tech to manufacturing to furniture companies to construction to you name it. And the size of them really differ. Like we have one company in our cohort now that has 1,000 employees. And then we have a number of other ones that have between 15 to 40 employees. And so I know right now I'm actually needing to do some market research on what is that pool of entrepreneurs at that stage across all 4 provinces and across all region look like. How do I go about that? Okay, that's going to be a fun exercise. Once you have all of that, then you're synthesizing it. Make sure you're really clear on who is leading it, how will the information be shared, reflected upon, and lots of other pieces as well. And so this definitely takes a lot of time, especially with that building piece. But these slides are sort of meant to be step by step. You start to pull them together. This piece here is with McKinsey. It's called the McKinsey 7S model. And if you Google that, you'll find lots of different templates. There's tons of them out there. Some parts are maybe a little bit overkill and overcomplicating, but this would be one section that I really liked of how they organized it, is that I don't love the terminology of soft and hard skills, but I get what they're trying to put a point on. Is the soft elements when it comes to building that strategy is the skills, the staff, the style. What are those underlying pieces relating to the shared values that show your ability or not, your inability to potentially execute on a strategy or go in a direction? So you want to be really mindful in mapping that in that strategy. The other side is the hard elements, structure, strategy, systems. So let's say you are part of government or you're part of the military or really regulated industries. Well, the structure is probably going to take you a whole lot longer than a business that's smaller and nimble, that doesn't have as many policies and procedures tied into it. And so you want to make sure that you're thinking through that, because that will affect how you actually develop that strategy and all the key players. Same with if you're in a 5-person company to a 200-person company or a 50-person company. You want to think through who are those stakeholders and individuals involved. All that. The next piece here is with communicating and implementing the strategy. So there are lots of different elements where people have created this amazing, beautiful 20-page strategic plan. They've spent all this money on hiring a consultant to write this whole thing, and then it kind of falls flat. People underestimate communications and how you actually market that strategy. And it really matters internally and externally. Like the point I made earlier, if you've been with that company for 5 or 10 years and now there's a new CEO, there's all these different elements that make a big difference. That how are you actually sharing that information internally across the company? Maybe there's funders, all that type of thing. the external part is like, does it need to be public? Maybe in your case, you don't need to be because you're a small company, you're nimble. It's just your board of advisors and your close internal team that really need to know. No one else really needs to know that whole plan. And you need to map this. You need to think through this because it's going to affect how you actually communicate it. And so if I was part of a very public organization, could be a startup, could be a not-for-profit, could be government, the big part there would be, well, maybe I want to do Ask Me Anything sessions like AMAs. Maybe I want to record a fancy commercial to show what those strategic plans are. Maybe I want to do something else. And so maybe it's a big launch event on what that new strategy is. All those pieces you want to think through. People always underestimate this, and you need to ensure that everyone is singing the same song, basically singing from the same songbook as if you're a choir, especially if there are drastic changes in your new strategy. Any questions on that so far? I'll pause before I get to my last one. I'm talking a little bit faster than the last session. Okay. Group's pretty quiet. Okay. Last one here, last slide or template is the evaluating and corrective action. So with measurements, there's quantitative and there's qualitative. And so there's the ones that you can really count, but then there's the other ones that are more, I'll say, words. And so are these, whichever change you're trying to do across the organization, what are people saying about it? Not just like, for example, with WMI, I can count the number of organizations that are still continuing on with their forum or with their peer group after year one. But then on the other side, I have all these testimonials and quotes from them of the impact I know that the program has had. And so in that measurement, I think of it also as the tone of what you're trying to capture. Maybe the organization had a bunch of trust issues in the past, and through this new strategy, it's to completely shift the public's perception so that the public will trust them again. How do you actually do that? That's through a branding exercise, it's a positioning exercise, all of that. But how will you actually measure that? Which then leads you into the targets and KPIs. And so these are typically the hard numbers, but how do you know if you've been successful in this or not? Oftentimes I say it's also progress, not perfection. And so even if you don't necessarily hit the perfect goal, how close were you to hitting that goal? What stopped you from that? And then the other part is check-ins and accountability. So we mentioned a little bit about timeline, but you'll see on the side, I also say corrective action. A lot of individuals are scared because they put a plan in place. They're scared to adjust that plan. Well, not every plan is perfect, right? Like if you're on a road trip and suddenly there's a storm, you're going to need to divert somewhere or go somewhere else within that. And so when it comes to those accountability and corrective actions, what are those check-in points for you to know if you've done well in it or not, how far off you are? Because you want them to be in a very, I'll say, systematic time frame so that if there is a big issue, you hopefully still have time to adjust that strategy or the tactical execution of it. And it's not a complete surprise for all the individuals that are involved. And so it is really important to figure out who's keeping your feet to the fire, and what does that time frame and layout of timelines look like. Okay, that's about it on these ones. Any questions so far? So looking back at these 5, I've got a couple other little slides. Us a group here is, so in the earlier session, I mentioned about there was 3 common pieces of why organizations fail on strategy. One of them I said was they don't face the problem, they kind of avoid it. They're not trying to solve the real problem and dig into it. The other one was inability of focus and choose. And then the third one was emotions. People underestimate the power of relationships and mindsets that people have getting into it. Are there any other common big issues that you've seen when you've jumped into strategic planning? And it could be as a participant, or maybe it's when you develop one on your end. If you could throw that into the chat, that would be great. quiet group. So I won't repeat all these slides again, or all these different sections, but that's the summary of it when it comes to those elements. What I did do, oh, my mouse is catching here. What I did do as well within that deck is there's these two other ones. It's sort of personal preference of what you like. What I would recommend to do is that you use the sort of table format ones like this to use it as your brainstorm. And then once you start to think through your ideas, everything's sort of flowing, then you can, I'll say, do the quick review one, because it's going to be iteration. You're never going to get it on the first try. And so I do think of these like the lean canvases and business model canvases. And so this can help you start to organize all those ideas that you had previously into something that's a little bit more digestible. Obviously, if your organization is looking to write a very formal 25, 30-page strategic plan, totally. This can just serve as that skeleton to help you work through it. This is the other part where I said people typically can't remember more than 3. And so I like thinking of them as pillars. You can think of them as columns, whatever you choose in that respect, but you can have those top 3 themes. If you're having a hard time aligning on those themes, that's where you do want to use the dot matrices or dot democracy for it. And then you have subcategories, which are quick sentences and your measurements and metrics. And somebody mentioned in the last group, it's really hard sometimes when you're working through with large organizations. How do you actually get everyone on the same page with everything? Because it's so much, there's so much information that people are trying to digest, and it's confusing. And so I find it's that if even if you write that 25-page document, things like that, I would still highly recommend that you reorganize it in a way that actually is easy for people to follow into something like this. And this was the slide I mentioned earlier. It's going to be linked in the slides as well. That I really liked as a scorecard, as that quick 1-pager that we touched on. I went through much faster this time. Somebody asked a question here from Amber. Great presentation. Do you have any techniques for uncovering resistance to change that people might not even realize exist? Ooh, that's a good question. So when you say, do you have any techniques for uncovering resistance to change that people might not even realize exists? So I think what I would need clarification on is like, what do you mean by which people? Do you mean the board? Do you mean the CEO? Or do you mean the people don't realize, like let's say it's employees. It's the employees don't realize they're resistant. So what I would say, I do a power map a lot of times when I take on a project. And so I will literally draw a little axis that's, Michael, it's been a little while since I've actually done it. But I'll draw an axis that basically is like, okay, all the different people that I'm working with, who has lots of power and influence. And then it helps me prioritize the people I need to pay attention to, because there's some people that are resistant to change. Well, guess what? They're going to have to go along with it anyways. But if it's someone that's resistant to change and maybe they're a board member, or an investor, I'm absolutely going to have to handhold that relationship a lot more. And so I'd say trying to figure out why that resistance is there is a really big thing. Because if you're feeling a lot of resistance from, let's say, employees, is it because they're worried about their jobs and this new strategy automates so many things that it makes their job at the bottom of the chain obsolete? Well, if that's the case, of course, they're worrying about their job. They might get fired or laid off in a month or 2 or 6 months. And so there's definitely that to think in mind. And so coming back to techniques would be draw out the power, who has the power, so you know who on that list does, and try to dig deeper on what is causing that resistance and go from there. Hope that helps, Amber. Any other questions on strategy or the slides that I shared? Okay. I'll post the link again in the chat, and feel free. Don't be shy. The last couple things I'll just mention to kind of close off, because I think for the host, we might end up a little bit earlier than anticipated is if you're new to Wallace McCain Institute, I'm curious, actually, if folks don't mind typing into the chat, who has never heard of Wallace McCain Institute before? Okay, or if you have, you can. Just curious. You can type it into the chat if you have, or give me a thumbs up. I can kind of see the trend of little thumbs. I've got 1 thumbs up, 2. Okay. I've got 2 out of 24 people, 25 people or so. Heard of it? Okay. Awesome. Couple folks. Well, I've given, okay, so the little spiel about Wallace McCain Institute earlier. If you are brand new to it, you've never heard about it, like we are part of the University of New Brunswick, but we run professional development programs for CEOs and business owners in Atlantic Canada. And so we purposely have it in Atlantic Canada because the McCain family wanted to help grow the next global set of companies. And so we've been asked before of like, well, why don't you do a New Brunswick one or a Nova Scotia one or a Newfoundland one, all that type of thing. We don't, because we don't want to lose that diversity across the region. And a lot of the businesses that we work with, some of them they're not startups. And so a lot of them do have employees they're establishing, and a lot of them are getting ready to grow across different regions and provinces. And so we purposely want that mix of stage of companies based on their size, revenue, employees, but also their geographic difference. And so if you're new to it, which I think several people are, I just posted the link in the chat to the impact report. So definitely check it out. Lots of things there. You'll recognize some companies. Locally, we've got quite a few here as well. For any of you that are maybe growth stage entrepreneurs that are interested in a peer group program, it's very different than your typical incubator accelerator. It's peer groups. And so 70 to 80% of the content is actually from the group. All of the sessions that we do, yes, there's speakers, yes, there's facilitators, but it's really meant to build that super confidential space that CEOs and business owners, when it comes to ELP, space that they can have those deeper conversations that they can't have with their spouse, they can't have with their friends or investors, things like that. And so we really pride ourselves in that confidentiality and vulnerability with it. And so if any of you know of someone, or if you're interested in it, definitely nominate individuals. The applications for the Entrepreneurial Leaders Program is due on the 31st. And so if you nominate them or you self-nominate, you'll get an email with the next steps and everything. But we're super excited for that. And then we do have a Strategic Executives Program, which is for senior management, VP, C-suite folks that we're going to be launching in the summer as well. And so that's a peer group program, but it's for individuals that are in that, I'll say, 2IC role. And keep in mind, age right now in our ELP program, the age range goes from 28 to 61. And so from the mix of industries and backgrounds, it's all across the board. And we purposely do that in all of our peer groups. Yeah. And if any of you have questions, here's my contact. You can find me on LinkedIn. Don't tweet that much anymore. But yeah, that's everything. So we've got about, I think, 15 minutes remaining. If folks have questions, feel free. I know I'm a fast talker and I definitely talked a lot quicker in this presentation than last one. Anything else? Okay. One thing maybe I'll share since we have some time. We did have one comment from the last group that asked about how do you keep organizations sort of organized and sort of getting things flowing on the same page, especially when like creating procedures and all of that is really hard. What I had shown the group earlier, which I'll do here that might be helpful for folks, and just so we're consistent between the two, is that I've set up a number of organizations completely from scratch. And it's chaos, right? Especially some of you are early stage. It's like, how do you get people to name files properly? Like, how do you just keep people organized? It's hard. It's really, really hard. And so what I've kind of come up with from I'll say a system approach on my end, I do try to keep my files organized as much as I can easily. And so I try to think of it from a user experience side. A lot of these folders were created before me. And so these folders are all numbered based on the order of importance, but then within them, they also have key names that are easy to find. And so even we could name them based on alphabetical order, but that wouldn't necessarily make the most sense. So for us, we've added a number in front of it so that it can go into that chronological order that we want it to. Not everyone likes to save files and all that in different places. And so the other example I showed the group earlier was that I do this thing that I call a home base in pretty much every single organization I go into. Some of you, if you're into SharePoint, some people have SharePoint sites. Some people, I could do this as a Google Sites. Somebody asked earlier on, well, what about Notion or all these other tools? I want to like Notion. I've tried to use Notion for some reason, even though I'm very much an early adopter with tech. All the teams I've worked with, Notion hasn't quite caught on. And so I come back to some degree, when it comes to files and processes, what's the lowest denominator that's easy for people to understand? Most people understand spreadsheets. And so let's hyperlink, let's do all that so that people can find the information. They don't have to dig around. Yes, we still have our filing system, but it's never, people are not always consistent. This is the kind of the quick and dirty sheet of hyperlinks is really what it is, based on the functionalities that we have. And you'll see at the bottom, I've got a bunch of other tabs, and I'm just going through a bunch of changes. We've got everything from trainings and processes. So I've got a couple of interns that just started with me. So we're actually just creating this section right now, which will include, once we get a little bit further, it'll include, this is how you print name tags from Salesforce. This is how you get a unique form assembly update links. Our 5 fast flashes is our newsletter. So all the things like that, you can definitely, it's easier to access, along with our tools, key contacts, suppliers. It's just a spreadsheet. And therefore, I don't need to teach anyone how to use this tool, but it's very functional. So you don't have to kind of like chug away and try to dig around for files left, right, and center with it. So yeah, that's about it. So I think we've got a few minutes left. I think, hold up, everyone shy. No other questions? Feel free. What I will do, and so I'll come back to the reports page, nominations. I don't recognize a lot of the names, so folks, a little bit. What I will do, since we have a tiny bit of time, people are probably just hanging out a little bit until we get to go into the next session, is that we have a little newsletter that we have for folks that we send out. It's called our 5 fast flashes. And so what we do is it's a community newsletter. And so focus on entrepreneurship across Atlantic Canada. So different events, things like that go on. And so if you're interested, you can, oops, a little bit of a messy link that I'll post here, but it does work. We will throw it here in the chat. Okay. So somebody else messaged here. What are the top 2 ideas to manage all the items on fire all at once and keep the team aligned with strategy and switching hats all the time? That's a really good one. Well, so I would say, what is the go-to? So if I go back to, it's like, ultimately, it's the in and the on work. So if I come back to all the different pieces that we have, it comes back to that summary, right? And capturing that strategy in a way that's easy for people to digest. And so if I was even writing a 20-page strategy, it's like, okay, now what are those themes? So I'm in the middle actually right now of developing the strategic plan for Wallace McCain Institute, because I'm 5.5 months in, new CEO, all that type of thing. So I'm working with my board, I'm working with the alumni, sponsors, stakeholders, all of that. My themes will probably be, number 1, okay, like I've heard that our programs overall, people have a very good experience. Are there a couple tweaks here and there, logistical things that we need to make? Yeah. Do we need to change our nomination process to make sure that we are inclusive and diverse? Yeah. But I wouldn't say they're actually big strategy components. They're sort of more, a little bit more in the operational. But one strategic objective I have is how do we amplify the brand of Wallace McCain Institute? So if we want to grow, it's here. But all those elements are below that. And so if team members are getting distracted, I would try to make sure you have that go-to quick reference document for people to really go back to look at. The other part is things do happen. And so I gave the analogy earlier of landmines. And so when you talk to stakeholders, when you talk to issues happening externally or internally, I'm okay with there being landmines in the situation I get thrown into. But ideally, I have a rough idea of where that landmine and the direction of that landmine will be. And so that I don't get totally, I'll say, blown apart in that way, right? So hopefully I can try to avoid it as much as I can. And so trying to get that feedback and get to dig into that is really the really big thing. But it comes back to sort of having that quick digestible piece for folks in a document like this. No other questions? Okay. There's no other questions. I will resend the link. Oh, I think there's one more. It's just popped in. Yeah. Thanks, Jessica. Yeah. So if there's nothing else, I guess we could end a little bit early, but if some of you have questions, I can hang around here for a few minutes, but maybe folks can have a quick little break, I guess, before the last session, if that works for the folks. Nothing else? Oh, thanks, Jonathan. Awesome. Couple little comments. Thanks, Dennis.